And again, welcome everybody to the shared workshop today. This is our third installment of the shared workshops that the Open LMS team is doing, and this one's on the Moodle Gradebook, as you guys are aware of. And this is the shared workshop session number one. Next Wednesday, we'll have the session number two. And again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to working with you guys today. This will be a combination of a presentation here, and then I'll go into our demo environment and kind of show you some of the features that we've talked about. Going to the next slide here. So this is just the agenda, the kind of rough agenda for today. Session two will be for next week. But so we're going to talk about just in general successful gradebook. What is a successful gradebook? We're going to talk about gradebook setup and categories, and then gradebook reports. Again, with this, it might not be anything that's groundbreaking to you all, but what our goal today here is to do is kind of help you find some tips and tricks about the gradebook. But in addition, as some of you might have joined the previous workshops, I think this is a nice place for all of us to kind of talk together as just kind of, I'll use the word colleagues, all of us working in learning management systems, and kind of talk about some of these topics, and you might learn something from somebody else that's on the session here too. So I think it's a great way to kind of work together and just kind of come together and do this e-learning, if you will. So just starting out here with the Moodle Gradebook. So this is just a general slide that you guys are all familiar with, I'm sure, is just the general idea that the gradebook is more than just a gradebook, right? It's interactive, it's dynamic, it calculates grades, obviously, but it's there to monitor student progress, record data, and there's one report specifically that I'm going to talk about when it comes to record data, which is the Gradebook Report, which I sometimes when I talk to clients that have had Moodle experience, they're not familiar with that. So, and then as we're all aware of, it has the gradebook has reports in it too. And again, I know that everybody's probably familiar with the Gradebook Report, but there's some other reports that we just want to make everybody aware of. And for those of you that might not have used all the Gradebook reports, maybe we can provide you with some tips and tricks. And you said hoping I know all the tips and tricks. Always open to learning, dangerous to be overconfident. Yeah. Well, hey, again, it can't hurt, right? To always be open to learning, and hey, the overconfidence, again, it can't hurt, when we're in this type of environment where, we're open to share thoughts with each other. So yeah. One thing that I heard a long time ago from a colleague is, the worst thing about the gradebook is the gradebook is how flexible it is, and the best thing about the gradebook is how flexible it is. And it's kind of a funny saying, but some of you are probably familiar with this too, is that, some organizations keep the gradebook as simple as possible, so their instructors don't have the ability to customize it all that much, and it makes it a little bit easier on the administrators, and that's how they want it. Other organizations really want it customized, but when you do customize it, it can make things a little bit more difficult in terms of hi Rich, in terms of customizing it and understanding what's going on in a certain gradebook. So again, we're going to be talking about just in general the gradebook during these next two sessions to help you guys get an understanding of what gradebook reports, what categories you can create. But during the next session, we're also going to be talking about site admin settings where you can set default settings. So thinking about again, just the gradebook in general, you can create a gradebook an instructor can create a gradebook in their course and create some, they can have quizzes, assignments, and some other activities that are graded, and without having these three things: organization, aggregation, and appearance, it's in my opinion, there's a good chance that it might not be a successful gradebook. And what I mean by that is, it's something to think about. Is the gradebook it involves pre-planning. pre-planning and consideration to think about, having a successful gradebook. So for example, from the organization standpoint, how will a teacher organize the graded items, and where can they find the reports to better understand it? And what I mean by, just having a bunch of graded assignments and quizzes and things like that in the gradebook, if an instructor created the gradebook and didn't necessarily organize it, I'm not sure how easy it would be for the students to go in there and understand the course total and things like that. What aggregation strategies will be used? Again, I'm sure that you guys are all familiar with aggregation strategies. We'll kind of give a high-level overview of some of those today. And then how will the gradebook appear to students? So in terms of the appearance option there, again, you want the students to understand what they're looking at as much as you do. One thing that something that's kind of stuck in my head for a couple of years here when talking about the gradebook is, if an instructor cannot explain to the administrator or to a student, a grade calculation or something like that, how is the student supposed to understand their grades themselves? So it's important that if it does get a bit customized by the instructor, it is important that they understand it and can explain it to someone, so that the students themselves are able to understand their grades there. So talking about the gradebook setup here, so the gradebook setup is one of the first areas that instructors will look at when they go into the gradebook. So everybody's probably familiar, and again, I'll go into do a demo course later, but if you go into a course and you go to course administration, and then the first option is Gradebook Setup there, that's the first link it'll take you right into the Gradebook Setup area. The Gradebook Setup is the place where, again, you can create categories. You can plan out the course, including, as you can see here, all assignments and activities, an organization method. So in terms of the default course category, there is a default course category that is always created for every course. For example, if there was a course named ABC 123, as you guys are probably all aware, ABC 123 gets created. But if, let's say, for example, that instructor wanted to have weighted sections, for example, homework, exams, and assignments, where each were 33 1/3%, how would they do that? They would have to create the categories first. We always recommend creating those categories first before the activities are created, because you set the category level for each activity in the activity area. So, and again, I'll kind of show you what I mean there. So it makes more sense to choose the organization method first, create the categories, and then after creating the categories, you can create the graded activities. And it saves the instructors a little bit of time to be able to say, go to the grade area in the actual activity and say, okay, this assignment is going to be under the assignments option. Exams are going to be under the exam category, etc. One thing that, again, that some of you may or may not be aware of, individual grade items can be created for activities not completed online too. So, for example, what I mean by that is, if there are, and again, I don't know if I know a lot of schools right now. I think we had talked at the beginning of this. A lot of schools are using fully online with everything that's going on with COVID. But if you did have, paper activities or activities that were not completed online, these can easily be calculated in the gradebook too. And then the last part is test it. And log in with the test student and ensure it works the way you want. I think this is something that, when instructors are going through creating courses, and let's say they've waited until not the last minute, but pretty close to it, and they've created a gradebook, and they say, you know what, I don't have time to test it, I'm just going to jump right into it. The calculations might not work exactly how they want it to, and there could be some confusion once students actually get the grades in there. So if possible, I always encourage administrators to encourage their instructors to create a test student and log in with that test student. The reason why I say create that test student and log in with it and have them take example quizzes and things like that is because that's where you get the true one-to-one comparison. Again, you guys all might be familiar with the fact that you can do the preview as a student and you can take a quiz and things like that. But where you're going to get the true data representation is when you log in with that test student and you actually take the test and get the grades for test student A. So, and Ed, you see, let me see here. Key for me has been make sure the gradebook matches what is in the syllabus, and that's a great point. Yep, adding a syllabus and having an updated gradebook required for all courses regardless of the modality. Most use categories, as Michael's describing now. Some use a point, yep, natural system, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Happy about the test student use. We're just starting to do this on a more regular basis with instructors. Yeah, honestly, I think that's one thing that I really stand by. Creating the test students. I can't say that enough. I mean, again, you can even take tests with your instructor account. But again, you're not going to get that true one-to-one comparison of what a student sees until you log in with that test student themselves. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Ed. Appreciate that. So in terms of gradebook categories here, so again, as we had talked about, it allows a teacher to organize a gradebook in many different ways. These are just a couple examples, time per activity. So divided by time. So for example, if there were semesters, you might have 27-week semesters that's broken up into 9-week period, 3 9-week periods. So you can definitely do that. And with that one, you could say, okay, maybe I'm going to have assignments, quizzes, and everything in each 9-week period. Or you could say, I want to do it by activity, which is, I feel like that's a little bit more common way that I've seen organizations use it, where they say, again, all homework, let's say homework is worth 30%, quizzes are worth 30%, and the exams are worth 40%, something like that. So, again, categories are also filled up with, useful settings that, again, you guys are probably familiar with this, but when you go into the categories, you can choose options such as drop the lowest score and exclude empty grades, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Different categories can be set to different settings and use different calculations for the grades. And then categories can also show, again, as you guys are probably familiar with, but they can show their grades in different modes. So what I mean by that is it percentage? Is it showing the grades in percentage? Is it showing them in real, letter, etc.? So getting into the aggregation methods, you can see here, this is a list of all of the aggregation methods that are available in an environment, in an open LMS environment. You can see here the most common that we talk about is the natural grades, which is the sum of all grades scaled by the relative weights. Let me take with the number of people that are on here right now, when it comes to extra credit, a grade item itself can act as extra credit for the category, meaning that the maximum grade will not be added to the category's total maximum grade. But the item's grade will. So you can see here, this is just an example of how you might add an extra credit option into the natural grades category. And again, just some simple steps here that we just wanted to provide, kind of general example here. So, and then navigating next to the gradebook reports here. So again, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with the gradebook reports that are available on your site. Gradebook Setup, as we mentioned earlier, is the place to configure the gradebook. Again, that's adding the category, changing the weights, etc. The grader report, again, I think that the setup and the report are two of the most popular gradebook reports in my opinion. The grader report is the one that it's essentially the online grade book that that a teacher, it's most comparable to a paper grade book that people would have used in the past with all the students on one side in the rows, and then across the columns all the graded activities. But some that aren't as familiar, or some gradebook reports that aren't as popular, from just my experience and talking with people, is the grade history report. And this is one where, back when I was working with the support team, we'd have organizations that would say, we have multiple instructors that are in this course for a course of maybe 50 students, and somebody has, it appears somebody has changed the grade for a specific assignment, and the main instructor might say, well, I didn't do that. The grade history report is a great report from a troubleshooting perspective to say who exactly did change that grade. You can always assume that it might have been the other instructor in that course, but without having that grade history report, if you don't look at that, you might not have the specific details. If you go into the grade history, and again, I'll go into each report here in a little bit. That grade history report really shows the details about what has happened within each individual grade associated with each individual student. There's a lot of filters in the grade history report where you can choose to look at every single student or just a specific student in all their grades. So a lot of options there. The overview report. So that's users can access an overview of grades in all courses. So again, this one, I feel like it hasn't been used from my experience with other organizations. A certain instructor might say, I'd like to know, or a certain instructor or a certain administrator might say, I'd like to know Bobby Smith, how well is Bobby Smith doing in all of his courses? That overview report is the ability to go in there and say, okay, I'd like to see all the courses that Bobby Smith is enrolled in, and see what grades he has in these other courses. And I think, again, that one might be one, again, that from what I experienced, that might be one that's not as popular that instructors use, probably because it doesn't necessarily deal specifically with their course. It deals with other courses too. But I think it's a helpful report that people should be made aware of. Single view report. So that single view report, again, I think that this one's a little bit more popular. It allows course teacher to view either all the grades of one single student or a single grade item for all students. So this one, it's a little bit, makes looking at grades a little bit more flexible rather than just looking at the grading report and scrolling. That single view, I think, does a good job of saying, again, if I am an instructor and I want to know what's happened to a specific student, you can find that out there. Or again, as it mentions here, you can see, for example, on the final exam, what did every single student receive on the final exam. You can see that in the single view report. And then one of the other most important reports, in my opinion, here is the user report. The user report being important because that is the report that the students see on their side of things. So when they go into the course and go into the course dashboard and then look at the gradebook, they're shown that user reports. And it shows that logged in users' grades in that current course. One thing that, again, a lot of you might be familiar with here is the by the instructor. So from a troubleshooting perspective, let's say a certain student has, is looking at their report and they say, I'm not really sure, I don't understand the course total or what's written here with the aggregation methods. If, again, Bobby Smith says that to instructor Mike, I as instructor Mike can go into the Gradebook Setup area and the Gradebook Reports and go into the user report and look specifically for Bobby Smith and kind of see exactly what he's looking at, to be able to kind of know what they're seeing. So again, I think that all of these reports are good in their own way. Any questions or comments or anything that you guys have to add about the Gradebook Reports?
I will say that the grader report is probably the easiest one for the students to see.
Yeah.
It seems to make the most sense for them.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. With it being a little bit more, yeah, and I understand how it's set up. Yeah, and that makes sense. And Ed, we still find it necessary to hold gradebook help sessions every semester. Okay. Yeah. Even with basic grades book setup, instructions available on faculty resources. Of course. Yeah. I love the idea of having instructors enrolled into that faculty resources course. A few faculty have run into trouble with extra credit. Yep. Yeah. I feel like extra credit, especially with different aggregation types, can always cause some, it can be a little difficult to set up. If you have time and more use cases top of mind available, appreciate hearing a little bit more about that topic. Yeah, and then you say, as for reports, I have not successfully activated open reports, perhaps due to Flash or, so the open reports, it shouldn't be Flash at this point. You shouldn't, and I know that message does pop up about Flash, but there is a collect block that needs to be enabled at the site level. We can kind of, if we have time here, we can check that. I can check that for each, knowing that we have about 7 or 8 of you here. I can check your environments here. Yeah, the open reports, you should be able to see the information in there. We can do a quick check and see if the collect block is enabled there. So yeah, and those open reports, that isn't mentioned here, but that's a great point about the yeah, great, thanks guys. Yeah, and that's a really good point. In terms of Gradebook reports, I didn't mention those because I look at the open report more as outside of the gradebook and it may be a little bit more statistics related, but the open reports do have a number of grade, the actual grade information in there. There's a needs grading option which I think is really helpful. So yeah, we can actually talk about the open reports if we have some time here. So yeah, great call. And I don't have any more use cases off the top of my head right now, Ed. I know that's always something that comes to light, but let me do and send in the follow-up use cases of extra credit. I think that's a great call. I'm just making a quick note. Yeah, because that's again back when I worked in support a little bit more. That's a common question that we did receive was how can we use extra credit with for example weighted mean of grades and something like that. So yeah, perfect. Thanks guys. And then talking about different ways to calculate the final grade. So you give the students the ability to see a current up-to-date value or running progress, and this is by using the use exclude empty grades option. This can be set at the category setting at the site level, and can be turned on by default in all courses. The other option, as you guys may or may not be familiar with, though, is the edit calculations. With the calculating the final grade, I feel like some organizations, especially if you're an administrator that might have, this might be a false statement for some of you, but I was going to say for an administrator that might have jumped into a new environment that's taking over for someone else, they might not be aware of these settings. But exclude empty grades, again, that's where, for example, if you have 10 quizzes, and a student has taken quiz number 1 and they've received 100%, if exclude empty grades is unchecked in that category, it's going to show that they have an F because it's not taking into account those empty grades, or because I should say it is taking into account those empty grades because it's not excluding them, if you will. If you exclude the empty grades, then the gradebook will be smart enough to say, well, I know that there's 9 other quizzes, but we're not going to count those. So this person's received 100%. They have a current grade of an A in the course. The area to go to is you go to site administration, grades, report settings, grader report, and you go all the way down into show calculations. There's a setting there. When you check that show calculation setting, what that enables every single course to be able to do is actually go into that course total. And rather than, again, you're probably familiar with this, Carrie, that if you don't have this checked in this area, when you go into a course and go to the course total, the only option you have is to hide it. If you choose the show calculations option in the grader report settings, then what you're able to do is any instructor can go again to that course total, and there's an option to edit the calculation and add in whatever calculation or formula that they'd like to. So again, that can cause some confusion. I've had to use this on occasion to fix issues with synced third-party grades not coming to right. Yeah, we generally do not encourage instructors to edit the calculations. And Ed, that's a great point. I think the edit calculations can be, again, for an instructor that might not be too familiar with writing formulas and things like that in terms of gradebook calculations. They might think they know what they're doing, but it might cause some confusion on how the course total is being calculated. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about. But yeah, exactly. But as long as you guys are aware of, from an administrator perspective, knowing that if it is turned on, you know where to turn it on, you know where to turn it off, and you know that it is on, that might help you from a troubleshooting perspective know, hey, we do have calculations turned on. So now if you have an instructor, a newer instructor that might reach out to us and say, I'm not sure what's happening with the gradebook, with my gradebook calculation. We've had that, again, going back to support, where, an organization or an admin might not be familiar with the setting, and the instructor says, well, the course total isn't showing correctly, and the administrator might not be familiar with the calculations. Now, being aware of that, you can say, okay, let me go into that calculations area and see if there's actually a value in there that's set up that I wasn't aware of. So, and we can talk about that, the open reports here too. So thank you. Yeah. So this is our demo environment where, again, I just wanted to jump in and kind of show you guys some things here. Again, hopefully some of this isn't too basic for you all. Again, I think, hopefully we can, some of this information that we're talking about is providing some tips and tricks. Also, in terms of the open reports, I think that's something that has been brought up that'll be helpful for everybody too. So I'm going to go into this managing high-performing teams, and we'll give this a moment to load up here. There we go. So you can see that this course is set up with a number of table of contents here on the left-hand side. And as we talked about earlier, I go into course administration, and Gradebook Setup is the first option there. And again, I'm sure everybody is familiar with this idea, but you're taken directly into the Gradebook Setup, and then from there you can either use the drop-down option to access the other reports, or you can use these options here. Again, during next week's call, we're going to be talking a little bit more about scales and importing and exporting and things like that. But when it comes to Gradebook Category Setup, so again, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this, but in case you're not, when a course gets created, and I'm sure I know that you guys are all I'm sure familiar with the idea that the Gradebook category gets automatically created with the course name, so Managing High Performing Teams LF. it gets created automatically. But then you can see here in this course we have what we've set up as a participation category, a lessons category, an assignments category. And you can see under each one, we've broken it up into, participation is worth 420 points there. Lessons are worth 150. Assignments are worth 500. And then the course total is worth 1070 points. So this is an example, just jumping down to the course total for a minute while I'm here. This is where the show calculations option is not turned on. So again, from time to time, I speak with administrators who might have an advanced instructor who might say, I'd like to edit my calculation a bit here. Why can I not do that? It's because that setting isn't set in the site admin level. And again, for that, Carrie, I think you mentioned that. It's that site administration, grades, report settings, and grader report. And when we go down here, we'll show that show calculations is unchecked. So you can see if enabled when editing, a calculator icon is shown for each grade item and category with the visual indicator. So again, we'll go into a lot of the session number 2 is going to be talked about. We're going to go into the site admin settings here. So let me just go back into this high performing teams here and go back to course administration, gradebook setup here. And you can see here, so in looking at, for example, in the participation category, if I go into the edit settings area here, you can see, as I had mentioned earlier, you can choose each type of aggregation method within each category. It makes a lot of sense to keep the aggregation methods the same within each category. This is set for natural. And you can see, for example, the exclude empty grades. It's checked here for this category, and it is for the other ones too. But so that's an important setting. Again, you set that at each category level there. So going down here, some of these other settings, maximum grade, minimum grade, these are grayed out. So again, based on the aggregation method that we're using, these options aren't available at the moment. But then, some of the other things that we talked about, the grade display type shows, so what type of grade display type do you want to show? By default, it's showing real. Again, this is something that you can set at the site admin level to say, for all new courses created, I want it set to percentage, for example. So that's just, again, something you guys are probably familiar with, those options there. And again, I can't change the participation total because we don't have those calculations there. So, and just going through each one, a little bit of a, for those of you that may not have used every single report here, I'm sure you have though, but you can see here in the grader report, as I mentioned, that's very similar to, traditional gradebook where every student is listed on the left-hand side. All the assignments are across the top here. Choosing a certain assignment here across the top is where you can take it to, and you can grade an activity. Again, we'll talk a little bit more during the next call about the actual grading options. As you guys are probably familiar with the fact that, for some of these grading options or just the ability to do things can be done in multiple ways. So, but you have the grader report, and then this moves over here. But one thing that actually I should mention while we're on the grader report, the turn editing on feature. If you turn editing on, you can actually edit an individual grade here. So again, I think I don't see this being used all that often, but I think it's something that's good to know about. That it's something that's not necessarily mentioned in a lot of places, but this is where, if there's multiple instructors in the course and there's a specific grade that's entered into a course or to a specific student, you might see this information in the grade report. So let's just say Jack Davis. I'm going to add that in here. And turn everything off. Oh, let me go back here. Sorry, didn't take. There we go. So you just hit enter there, and then that's, again, you guys might be familiar with this fact, but if there were grades in this share your experience forum, and everybody received a grade and it wasn't something that was manually entered in here, all the other squares here would be a different color, and it would kind of highlight, and you would know which one has been manually edited. So let me go back and turn editing off here. This is an indication, a color indicator, knowing that this activity was updated manually. So yeah, I know, right? Yeah, high performing team is not very active. Sorry, I'm silly and find humor in odd places. Yeah, no, you're fine, Ed. Yeah, I know. I need to have a little more. Speaking of my test students and how I encourage them, I should use that a little bit more on my own, right? Yeah. So yeah. But going into the grade history now, let's go for Jack Davis, and you can see. So again, some of you might use this, some of you might not. But if for example, I go into, let's say, Jack Davis, and I go to finish selecting users, and I want to say all grade items and all graders, and I'm not going to do revised grades only. We can click submit here. You can see that the grade here was set to 10 here. The share your experience was set to 10. And if you look, was it overridden? Yes. And you can see that there. So Ed, our test students seem to be the same way. You can't seem to motivate them. But yeah, so this is, again, going back to maybe you guys are familiar with this, from a troubleshooting perspective, but this is a good report to be able to see, who has overridden grades. Because you can kind of look here and say, okay, let me just sort it by overridden, and you can see what grades have been overridden and see that there. So again, just a quick little tip, in terms of finding, something, a grade that's been overridden that you weren't sure who's done it. I see that more being, again, going back to, being in support and having administrators maybe reach out to us with one of those courses that might have 250 students in it, and it might have 3 instructors, and they say, well, somebody changed this grade and it wasn't us. This is a great way to say, well, it actually was one of you. It was one of the instructors. So, and as you say, interesting, I've always relied on color change in the graded report. Yeah, well, and that's a good way to do it too. But the nice thing, you can kind of see who's done what too. Again, going back to if you have multiple instructors in the gradebook. Yeah, so overview report, again, just going back to kind of what we talked about. If we want to look at a particular user and see what grades they have in the course. Yeah, there you go, Ed. Right? Yeah, for sure. Again, this is something that for the first couple of years that I worked with, and I've been doing this for going on 6 years now. It's something that I didn't use all that often, and I wasn't really aware of all that much. But the overview report, I think it's a great report for, let's say, and for you guys from an administrative perspective, you have, let's say you have a parent that comes to you and says, well, how's my student Jack Davis doing in this course, or doing in the site, across the board. This could kind of, I know it's not a report card, but it could kind of be used as a really general report card where you might say, you know what, well, yeah, I want to know what Jack Davis is doing. Obviously, you can go into each individual grade, each individual course and look at the grades, but from a quick high-level perspective, you can say, let's say Jack's mom's name was Judy, and you can say, Judy Davis, your student has a 10 in managing high-performing teams, and he actually doesn't have a grade for Camera 101 or Algebra 204 because it looks like he hasn't done anything yet. And she might say, well, from what I understand, he should have been doing something, so there should be a grade. Now I can talk to them. So again, this overview report, in my opinion, might be something that might be used more from an administrative perspective when you need to find, what's going on, for a student at the, entire site level. So. Single view report, again, we had mentioned that this has a couple options. You can say, let's say, for example, I want to see about share your experience. We want to see all the grades for everybody there. So again, we can see from this perspective, this is another way to find out what type of grade has been overridden. So again, I think now, Ed, you had mentioned, there's the color coding in the grader report. There's the grade history. One other place, again, so you can find out three options to find out if a grade is overridden, and it's by using the single view report. So you can say if everybody else had a grade in here, you would know that, well, everybody else has received a grade, but Jack's grade was overridden. So again, just another way to do this. Or you might say, you know what, I want to find all of Jack Davis's grades. You can do that by looking at this report this way. And in this single view report, I should have mentioned earlier too, is the fact that you can overwrite grades here too. So, and I say that in comparing it to the user report. And I bring up the user report because you cannot overwrite grades in the user report. So the user report is specifically read-only for the instructor. And again, this comes back to more of the idea of what exactly do the students see? And I know, I think it was Rochelle, you had mentioned, it was Rochelle or Melissa had mentioned the idea that the grader report is a nice report for the students. This user report, I think it also works well too. It shows, right now, it shows grade, percentage, feedback, and contribution to course total. Again, during the next call, we're going to talk more about, the ability to add more options in here. Some of you may or may not be aware of that, but you can add, for example, a ranking. So if a certain instructor wants to have, what rank am I in, based on my score, you can add that in there. Again, a lot of options at the site level to set up some of these reports. And again, we're going to talk a lot about that during the next call here. But this goes back to the idea that, I'm Jack Davis and I'm looking at a report, and let's say I'm not sure why the lessons total is calculating to a specific grade. Here, Jack might look at this and say, it's showing 75%, or they might not even. Some students might not be able to explain it that well, right? They might say, well, what's this 75% that I'm seeing in the user report? And if they can't communicate that well, the nice thing is that the instructor can come and say, okay, Jack, let me go view it as you. They can use the user report, view it as them, and say, okay, let's look at this together. So let me look at our students use this more. Okay, good to know, Melissa. Yeah, and I think that they're both good, but again, we'll talk about adding more options in here too, and do you want percentage, or do you want something like real grade, things like that. So yeah, definitely. Okay. And one thing I did not mention in the presentation, but there's the gradebook report preferences. So in terms of, we have the gradebook setup, right, where you're creating the individual subcategories, if you will. But when it comes to that grader report, there are a number of options that you can change within that grader report to know, why are we seeing what we're seeing there? For example, showing calculations, showing the hide icon, the show hide icons, column averages, again, as you can see here, locks. There's a lot of options in here. I won't go through every single one individually. But I think it's good to know that you do have these options within the grader report. The grader report is something that can be customized. It's not something that you just have to take it and say, okay, this is what we have, and we have to use it with the best way it's set up. There are options in here. You can see the quick grading, show only active enrollments. I've heard some organizations, like to see this. They think about, hey, I do want to see a previous semester's enrollments, just to kind of compare those with active enrollments. You can show more than active enrollments. Students per page, again, this one, I feel like this is a pretty standard option, and those of you might be familiar, a lot of you might be familiar with this, but again, going back to, let's say there's a large intro course, introduction to history, and there's 150 students in it. What's the way to change how many students the instructor is seeing? It's on this general page, or this general setting, students per page. By default, I believe it shows 25 students per page. And what I'm referring to is when you go back to the grader report, and you go to grader report here, you can see that right now we just have the 10 in there. But again, if there were 250 students, it would be, you're not going to see all of them all at once. You have that option of saying, I want to see more than 25. Maybe I want to see 50 or 100. So again, just something good to know about in terms of the ability to, when you go to set up and change that grader report preferences there. So let me stop for a moment. Any questions, comments, feedback on any of the gradebook reports that we've talked about here? Get it? Yeah, thanks, Rich. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and again, I know, it's not groundbreaking, showing calculations, advanced calculations in terms of how to use the gradebook, but we think that this is, again, ideally to provide some tips and tricks on how best to use the gradebook, and something, when it comes to troubleshooting certain issues, hopefully that's helpful. On the topic of can you show, and Carrie, can you show the total points and the percentage letter grade on the course total, or do you have to pick one or the other? So let me go back here. So let me check something really quick here. And I believe that you have to show one or the other on that course total there. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not familiar of a way to choose the percentage and letter grade. And let me see. So let's see here. And I wonder if, let me turn on the calculations here for a moment. Our faculty export to Excel and add a column to figure percentage of letter grades based. Okay, that's good. Yeah. So let me see here. Move toward competency-based assessment will become an issue. You can show real and percentage. I don't recall letter and percentage. Check grader report preferences. Yeah. Yeah, let me check the grader report preferences there. So yeah, but you're right, Ed, in terms of the competency-based assessment. Right. I think the more organizations turn towards that. I think it is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So yeah, completely. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, let's go back and look at the grader report here, preferences. And so range display type, yeah, I'm not seeing, and I might take that as a follow. Let me check one other thing here really quick. Let me turn on the calculations for a moment here. I doubt it would be in the calculations, but let me go into grader report and show calculations. And if it doesn't show up here, I can take that as a follow-up too here. Let me check one other thing here too, the user report at the site level. So show percentage, show weightings, show average. So yeah, I mean, so the one thing that we do have the option of showing is the letter grades, but for this is the user report, but that I'm not sure that would show for the course total, show contribution to course total. Let's go back into that course and kind of see.
So this is Ed. If you're in the course, it's the course grades settings. Sorry, not the grader report.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, course grade settings. I got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So grade display type so let's see here, overview report, course total. Yeah, so let's kind of go through course grade settings. So aggregation position, min and max grades wouldn't be in there. Change defaults, grade display type. So yeah, that doesn't allow you for the display type to show multiple options there.
Okay. So in our site administration, we've got it set up so they have an option there. There is some drop-down options.
And say that again, Ed, sorry.
Right, for the display type.
Grade display type, yep, yeah.
We do have options available in our drop-down. So maybe that's at the site level then.
Yeah, okay. Course, yeah, okay. Yeah, and let's see here. Let me go back, course grade settings. Grades, report settings. Grade category, let's see here. Yeah, let me actually look into that a little bit more, Carrie, for you. I can take that as a follow-up here and just to not use a lot of that. Yeah, you're welcome, for sure. Yeah, good question there. And again, yeah, the course grade settings, and that's a great point, Ed, in terms of the course grade settings. Again, some of this can be set at the site level here too, as you had mentioned. You can see, it goes into grade item settings, overview report. You can change, if you're showing the rank, going down to the user report. So again, you set this at the site level, but at the individual level, at the individual course level, if I'm an instructor and I want to kind of change the default there, I have the option to do that here. But yeah, I'll do a follow up on that. And we have a little bit of time here in terms of the open reports. Let me, because I do want to talk about a little bit of a homework assignment in a little bit here, but let's go back to the open reports for a moment here, since that's something that a couple of you have mentioned. It's not working that great for you, or it's not working at all. Can you? Was it? But let me go back. I'm looking back.
Well, I think somebody mentioned, this is Rochelle, that it was because of Flash, and I have the same issue.
So you're not able to use your reports because of Flash? Let me see.
All right, tell us you have to draw the front page of your book. So you draw it, and then I'll write it when you're done. Are you hungry?
You go into your production environment,
So we don't need to burn.
Michelle.
I'm sorry, you're a little fuzzy right now.
Sorry, say that again.
Our problem is that we're not allowed to have Flash, and it says you must enable Flash.
Yeah, that message. Yeah, let's see here. Let me take a quick look and plugins, blocks. Yeah, collect block is turned. Okay. Oh, actually, so I know it says that message, but so Rochelle, if I look, I also get the message to enable Flash, but the reports are working for me. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I am familiar with that message. I was just kind of looking through this. So Rochelle, actually, in your production environment here, the collect block was enabled, but none of the data endpoints were selected here. I think that this, I'm not 100% certain, but I think that this might have something to do with it. Is it okay with you if I enable these data endpoints?
Sure.
Okay. So what this is, and this is kind of something that I wanted to look at for the other folks here, and again, I'm glad this was brought up, is that the collect block, it predates me. In the past, this is past 6 years, it had to be added to every single course. Now it does not in the past couple of years or so, if not 5. But at the plugin, so at site administration, plugins, blocks, and managed blocks, the collect block has to be enabled, so it's turned on. But these data endpoints also have to be checked. So, so when you go to course, you have to or check enabled and grade. We keep the run data collection set to every 2 hours. We highly recommend keeping that there. We don't want to do every time because, as you can imagine, if you're doing every time, it's going to take some time. The fact that the statistics will always be trying to kind of collect that data. So, but let me check all of these options. You can see for this is, Rochelle, course user. So it collects enrollment end date, start date, course grade, etc. So I'm going to check all these options here. Activity, again, you can see what it collects, grade, name, sort order, etc. So one thing that, just as a note, at the very top, and I'll go back to that in a moment, Rochelle, and I can turn this on for anybody else that needs this turned on too, if it's not. But hidden courses are excluded. Would you like hidden courses to be included in the, there we go. Yeah, so at the very top, exclude hidden courses. Yes.
We are seeing only your course grade settings page.
Oh, thank you, Bree. Yeah, let me. I was sharing only the one. Yep. Sorry about that. I was sharing only the one tab there. So coming back to your site here, this is your site, Rochelle. This is what I was talking about earlier. So site administration, plugins, blocks, and then I went into the collect block settings. And this is what I was referring to here. So these options were not checked under course. Enabled, it was not checked. None of these checkboxes were checked here.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I went ahead and checked. So I checked enabled and grade for course, and you can see it collects for the course data endpoints, if you will. It collects the grade. But then when it talks about course and user, about users and their enrolled courses, it collects information such as enrollment end date, start date, course grade. So we enabled all these data endpoints. What I had mentioned about the run data collection every 2 hours, we recommend keeping that set to 2 hours. Every time, obviously, we don't want to do that because that's going to cause a lot of action in your site, and it's just constantly looking for reports, which we don't recommend having that set to every time. But I think 2 hours is good. But we went down and selected all these options. The one question that I had a question on was exclude hidden courses. Do you want the course? Do you want hidden courses to be able to? Do you want us to be able to see the data in hidden courses? I don't know how many. Yeah. Okay. And I think that's fine. Some organizations might have hundreds of hidden courses, so I think that's why they uncheck this. But yeah, so let me go ahead and click Save Changes then. And let's see. Yeah, good to know, Ed. Yep, for sure. Yeah, Melissa Hill. Let me scroll back up again. Yeah. Let's see. Got it. Okay. It's this collect block that it does have to be enabled. So we want to make sure. Don't worry about the fact that there's no instances set here. No instances. You don't have to add this collect block to a course. This is perfect that it's just enabled here with IOpen, and then I went to that settings there, and that's where it gave me the data endpoints here. So I'm pretty certain that it's going to, we're still not going to see the reports just yet, Rochelle, for another couple hours, and I don't want to force it right now just because I'm not sure how much information will be there. But let me just. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, this should. So going into here now, when I should have asked, and I'm going to go to course administration, reports and dashboard. And then, so the one thing I'll say about this dashboard, there isn't a way to, this is, at least at the moment, there isn't a way to change what's appearing in the dashboard. I like to say take the dashboard with a grain of salt. If it doesn't have a lot of data to display over the last 7 days, I don't think that the dashboard is really the greatest option when it comes to these course reports. I think really where you want to dive into is the activity grades and et cetera. So let me see. So this, let me go back. I need to, I've been clearing out some courses and I need to recreate some grades here, but let me go back here. Would there be a reason to add the collect block to individual courses? There wouldn't be. And ours were turned on, but also had every time selected. Just change those. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there wouldn't be. There shouldn't be a reason to have to add those to the individual courses, Ed. Nope. But you can see. So from course reports, I go to activity grades and I can see the grades. So again, I've been clearing out some courses to just update some course information. So I don't have a lot in here at the moment, but assignment submissions, you can see assignment submissions, and you can see all assignments, all sections. I think that's what makes, in my opinion, it makes these reports so powerful is the fact that there are a lot of filters too. So you can say, I want to look at all assignments or specific assignment and all users. So you can choose all users, all groups. The option that I was talking about earlier, needs grading. So again, let me go into bug testing course. Let's see here. This one might be a little bit more active. Reports dashboard. And go to activity grades. Yeah, there we go. So you can see, if I go into the activity grades and the course reports here, I can see a number of activities in here. So the users, it lists out the users, and this is just all activities and all users. Then the other nice thing about this open reports is that you can actually email or you can message a student. So you might say, oh yeah, I've been waiting for Pat McAfee to complete the testing comments and feedback assignment. He did, and he got a 90%. Great. I want to send a message to Pat McAfee. You can come down here and click send message to student. There is also an export option down here too, which is nice. But yeah, so you can see that there's a number of options: course reports, and then activity grades, activity views. So, and again, some of this information, I don't have a great course because I've been clearing it out, but it's nice to see. You might want to say, okay, how many times, and this is probably something that you don't necessarily see in the gradebook. Let's say you want to know how many times has a certain student clicked on an assignment. You can see how many views a student has made on a certain assignment. So you'll see the one grade in the gradebook, right? But you might be able to see, oh, Bobby Smith viewed this assignment 8 times. So is Bobby Smith, is he having trouble understanding the assignment? Why did he view it 8 times and only, and it was only submitted once? So can you set PLD rules using this? In terms, never. Okay, sure. Yeah, you can't, not to run reports if that's kind of what you were thinking. But yeah, so needs grading again. Yeah, I don't have an example on there, but what I will do in the follow-up too, you guys might be familiar with this, but we have and there's a little bit of background. I'm not sure. So open reports. There's a great. I think we have some really nice documentation about the open reports here that lists out the 5 open reports that are available, but then breaking it down into what does each one show you, right? Needs grading, that speaks for itself. But when you really get into like the correlation reports, the exception reports, which it shows which students are not interacting, learner review reports, which I think is kind of cool. You can kind of see do comparison. Well, and that's the comparison reports where you're comparing engagement with grades and things like that. But each of these really have their own advantage of using them. I'm going to put this in the follow-up email, and if you guys, for some of you that not have used this in the past, you might say, hey, maybe you send out a note to your instructors and say, hey, you might have used these open reports in the past, but there's some good information in here, and you can send them this link, and that way they can, kind of look at this on their own to kind of see, see how they might want to use these. Okay, cool, yeah, and great, yeah. And again, I'm glad you guys brought that up because, again, like I said, as I was going through this, it was something that, off the top of my head, it's not something that when I wasn't showing. Let me go back here. I was showing you guys the documentation here. Sorry, I'll just show my entire screen. Yeah, I'm glad you guys brought this up. This is the documentation here. Again, I think it really, we have some of the documentation. We're still migrating from the transition from Blackboard to LTG, but I think that this page looks really good. It has a nice breakdown of each type of report, the bullet point along each one, and I think that this could really be handy with a lot of your instructors to say, hey, I want to find out more than just the gradebook. Let's look at the average. One of these shows an average grade for a particular assignment and how many submissions and how many views it's had. So again, you can really get into a lot of good detail with this here. So again, yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I think that's a great point here. So again, and you can ignore this, and it must enable Flash in the browser. This is something that again, our DevOps team is working on and making sure that it's a little bit more clear. But you can see learner review reports. Let's see if I can do activity grades. So yeah, this is average grade here. Let me see if I have anything with comparison reports. And you can see as you change the report here, it changes the options to the right. So activities so this is a nice option. So with the activities comparison, shows how activities, as you guys can rate here, how activities in a course compare to each other. What's the average grade? How many submissions have been made against it, and completion, engagement hits, things like that. So again, I think it's a lot of good detail in here that I think it's definitely something that can be used. So I'll actually add a slide into the presentation about the open reports. Again, I'm glad that you guys brought this up. So so you guys can have that in case you guys use the presentation in the future. Any other questions or comments about the open reports here? And again, you guys should have my email. If something, Rochelle in particular, if something doesn't show in those open reports in the next couple of hours, reach out to me, email me, and we can look into that too.
Absolutely.
Cool. If there's no other questions, I know we're coming up on time here. The last thing that I wanted to show, I want to go back to the presentation for a moment. We have a little bit of homework for you guys. I know for some of you guys that might have had or participated in this workshops in the past, we'd like to have a little, we're doing e-learning, right? So we have to give a little bit of homework, right? So let me go to this homework assignment that we have here. And it's nothing too difficult, we don't think, but we just like to have you come up with, kind of put what we've talked about here to practice. And again, I think you guys have all done this, but hopefully it kind of just gets you into the idea of maybe you haven't so much at the site level or as a site administrator at the instructor level. But the homework assignment is general idea. OpenLMS has 3 terms per semester. The first and second term are both worth 30% of the total grade, and the total, the semesters have assignments, quizzes, and tests in them. And then the third term is worth 40% of the total grade. How would you create your gradebook categories to ensure the grades get calculated accordingly? And we've kind of given steps on what you would take to do this. If you guys wouldn't mind before the next Wednesday's call, just kind of going through and setting up these, setting this up, like going into the sandbox and just into your sandbox and setting up a course that has these gradebook categories and just kind of play around with it. And then submit a Word doc in the we have an assignments area in the course. So let me go back out to, first, I know some of you might not have had a chance to access the train site yet, and you might have just used the guest link. Just a quick reference here, in the train site we have the how to set up a gradebook for OpenLMS course, which we had an introduction form. I know we didn't have a whole lot of activity in there, which totally makes sense. I know we're all pretty busy, but session 1 using grade categories, there's an assignment in here. So if you guys wouldn't mind adding just some screenshots in there. The benefit of this is, if the assignment is completed, what we'll be able to provide you with this assignment, and the next assignment will provide you with a certificate. So it's nothing, it's a little something, if you guys want to, show your boss or something like that, it's something kind of neat. Again, going back to the fact that we're all doing e-learning, we wanted to make it a little bit more engaging outside of just the session itself too. So hopefully you guys kind of think that's a little fun. In terms of next week's session, so you can see here, if you log into the train site, there's open session number 2. And we're going to have, and I need to update this time, but then you can see the certificate here. So, but I will add the PowerPoint presentation into this course. So to access the PowerPoint presentation, you have to come here. And then I'll put a link, I'll send a link to the recording. But yeah, let me go back, and I heard that there was a note. Good. Yeah, thanks, Ed. See a thumbs up. Cool. Well, I know we're up on time here. I mean, that's really everything that I wanted to talk about. I can stick around for a couple minutes if anybody has any other questions. I definitely want to be cognizant of your guys' time. Really appreciate everybody's time here today. Hopefully you guys got some tips and tricks out of this, just in general on how to use the gradebook. I appreciate the interaction too. Again, we think that this is a nice way for everybody to come together. In addition to us sharing our tips and tricks, I think it's nice to get together like this too. So great. Yeah, thanks, Rochelle. Got some other thumbs up. So perfect. Yeah. So yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, it's again, these shared workshops, for those of you that this might be the first one, this is something that we're continuing to do. We're calling it, I like to call it Open LMS continuing education, where we want to provide this as, we don't want you to just have to reach out to our support team if you have questions. We're in the next couple of months, we've done some workshop on H5P. Great, Carrie. Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey and everybody. Yeah, it's, something that topics that we think that might be helpful to you all. We want to be more proactive as an organization and say, hey, let's do this. Let's do these workshops, and whoever wants to join, whoever has the time to join, let's do it. Again, we didn't go into a lot of detail about, gradebook calculations and things like that, but I think, talking about these open reports, hopefully that this has opened up a couple options for some of you. So again, I'll stop talking here. Thank you so much for everybody's time here today. Really appreciate it. It was great working with you all. You guys have my email too, I believe, from sending the email earlier. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll be in touch next Wednesday. So hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you all soon.